What is up, everybody? Happy holidays to you. Hope you're all doing well. Good to see you, Brian, Nate. Merry Christmases to you. Hope you had
Yeah.
a good one.
Christmas.
So
Yeah,
good
it's
stuff. Good
good.
stuff.
Yeah.
So a new thing for us this week. We're live on Instagram. Instagram
Ooh.
finally added the ability to go live. So if you're watching us on Instagram, we're trying to figure out. We're trying to make sure that all of our interface stuff works there. It looks like it may not. That the software that we use allows us to post comments to a few different places, but it looks like Instagram is not one of the places. So we'll get it set up. Nate, we'll get you set up in the future to where you can watch the Instagram tab as well in case we have some interaction over there. So but yeah, guys, we made it through Christmas. We're rolling into the new year, 2024. It doesn't sound real to me. 2024 doesn't sound like a real year or time. I'm not even sure that it is, to be quite honest with you.
Well, it's not yet.
Right. Yeah, we have no proof yet that it
Yeah,
does exist.
No
So
confirmation that we just don't run out of time and everything ends. I have no
there's
idea.
rumors. There's
Yeah,
rumors
exactly.
there. So
The Mayans weren't right about was it 2000 or what?
What's up?
No, 2012 was their thing.
2012?
Supposedly
Yeah.
2012. Everyone's like the
21,
world ends
12.
in 2012 because the Mayan calendar runs out. Like, or they just like we got it, and so we got 1,000 years. This calendar has enough space on it. We're good. We don't need to update it.
So I lived in Arkansas back in the 80s and 90s, and the folks may not be aware, but Arkansas is on the New Madrid fault line, big earthquake fault, or I guess what do they call it? Tectonic plates there.
The plates that scrape
Yeah.
together to make stuff shake. Yeah.
Right, and apparently is not as active as what's it? San Andreas is the big one out in California, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, it is not as active as the San Andreas fault line, but it is, I guess, more volatile when it does crack. It's supposed to crack big, and there was some prediction. I forget what it was, but it worked out to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. So it was like they said that there was going to be an earthquake like January 23rd at 4:56 p.m. It'll be a 7.8 on the Richter scale in 1990 was what they said, something along those lines. So they sold us all these earthquake preparedness kits that came in a big trash can. We're apparently going to survive an earthquake with a trash can full of stuff. Apparently was the intentions of that.
Okay.
And the town I lived in was 10 miles from the banks of the Mississippi River. And apparently when this fault line had cracked before, I believe back in the 1800s, the Mississippi River flowed the other direction, like it reversed the flow of the Mississippi. And there was massive flooding and all this stuff. So they were saying, so apparently we were going to have to float around on our trash cans when the mighty Mississippi reversed its flow and flooded the town. But fortunately, we did not have to do that.
Okay. The numbers, the string of numbers that all match up, that them selling you that is the premise.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I would have seen that and said, no, that's not happening. You guys are dumb. That's just not going to happen.
I kind of think everyone did. Well, not everyone. Look, everyone who's listened to this show knows that I'm not a fan of Arkansas. And there's not an abundance of intelligence in the part of Arkansas that I was in.
We're going to get letters.
Yes. So they're probably
they can't write, so we're fine.
That's right. We're fine. They're not literate. So, but apparently there was a lot of people really bought into it and were quite concerned. And I kind of thought it was novel. Like, oh, okay, we'll see. I did feel a few earthquakes there. I remember the first earthquake I ever experienced. I was in high school and I was in the bathroom, and it just felt like someone dropped another high school on top of our high school. Just a big, and I'm like, what in the world was that? Like the whole thing shook, and then later found out it was an earthquake. So
I found, and I've tried Googling to figure it out, but this is in the days before. The internet existed, but it was not nearly as useful as it is now. I swear that I was living in Eastern Oregon at the time, and it felt like a truck drove through the living room.
Yeah.
Like it passed through, and I'm like, what was that? Vibration like running through, and I think I brought it up, and people like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I
It's like, what are you even talking about here?
I don't
Yeah.
even know if there's a fault line there or anything like that, or where
Had
it would
you been
even.
drinking? I mean, are there
No,
other explanations here?
coffee. I was a fiend for coffee. I think this was
Okay.
back in high school, so I was
Okay.
drinking
All right.
coffee, but
That's a
no, I had
it
not
was a
been drinking.
caffeine
Yeah,
issue.
and I was at home, and they definitely would not have been getting into anything alcoholic while at
Okay.
home as a high schooler. But yeah,
A high schooler with a preacher dad, right?
yes, yeah. So
So,
coffee was fine though, and I had plenty of that.
yeah.
I guess it could have been. I don't know. Could have been too
That's
much coffee.
Brian's father was pretty strict on that. Like he wasn't allowed to watch MTV or he
Mm.
couldn't go out at a full moon for some reason. And
Yeah,
all
yeah.
his underwear had to be plaid. It was, I don't know what religion you were. I just never
No, I
questioned
did
that
not
kind of
have
stuff,
fancy
so.
underwear. I will.
Okay.
No, I
Tidy
definitely didn't.
whities.
Actually, definitely did not have fancy underwear. It would have been nice, probably, to
Yeah.
have fancy underwear. Mine
No.
was really not great at the time.
Yeah.
So.
Do you know what underoos are?
I know of them
Nate,
by
do you
name.
know
I don't
underoos?
know what they
I've
are
heard of it, but
exactly.
I don't know what it is.
So, like 6 or 7, they were the greatest thing ever because they were basically underwear printed to look like superhero outfits. So, like you get the Spider-Man one, and you'd have the underwear were red and a T-shirt that went with them. So they were like superhero theme underwear, and at the time they were literally the greatest thing ever. So, yeah.
I think that sounds familiar. I never had stuff.
All
like
right.
that. No, no chance.
Fun stuff. All right, guys. Well, good catching up. How about we start this live stream here and jump into what happened this year in beer?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Let me see. I'm ill prepared here. I take a week off and I just have no idea what's going on. So, all right.
Hopefully
I got
it doesn't
now.
loop.
Yeah, I was just checking that, Nate. Let's see. Wish me luck over here. Wait, no, is that right? Hold on. Okay, now it's off. Thanks, Nate. Welcome, everybody, to the Beer Guys radio show. We are glad to be here. We're glad to have you with us. This is our final show of 2023.
Yep.
We'll be launching officially on all the podcast platforms just before we roll into 2024. And as we have no proof that 2024 is a real year. I mean, there's some precedent to say that it's legit.
Yes.
But it doesn't sound like a real year. And so far it hasn't happened. So we don't really have any proof that it does exist.
We may run out of memory in the simulation's memory buffer. It may just end.
Yeah, we may be done. Yeah, the
possible.
simulation may end. It may be done. Guys, Christmas, we made it through Christmas. Made it through the holiday season. We're going to recap the year in beer. There's been a lot go on this year. Some good, some a lot, to be honest, not great. So, but we're hanging in there the best we can. I say we really didn't get the worst of it other than losing some breweries that we really liked. But we had a lot of friends really badly impacted by things. But, let's start this off on a little more positive note. Brian, as you were digging around there, one thing you stumbled on was Untappd's top 10 highest average rated beer styles for the year.
Yes.
It's always fun to look at these and see what's taken the top spot, how these styles stay the same and how they change over the years. So what do we got, Brian?
Yeah, so these are the styles, not individual beers themselves. So there are a lot of ties, and the difference between the styles' average ratings are like hundredths of a point. So a lot of that. At number 10, we've got Sizer Mead, which is mead made with apple juice or other cider, I guess. If it's, I don't know, I guess you can add existing cider to it already. I don't know. Anyway, that's at 4.09 on average. There is a two-way tie for position number 8 at 4.11, and the one of them I'm really intrigued by. It's rye wine, which is like a barley wine, except it's predominantly a rye-based grain beer. And the other one is something that we've made as homebrewers a fair amount. That's Mellow Mel mead, so a fruited mead. And
now, Brian, I want to jump back to your number 10 real quick because you mentioned juice or cider. Now, remember, cider is not inherently alcoholic.
That's
So
true.
there
Yeah.
is a juice and I don't know the difference. Nate, do you have any idea the difference in juice and
No,
cider?
not
So
really.
why don't you hit the Google for us so we can drop some knowledge? So ask Bard, ask Google Bard. It's really good about that kind of stuff. But
I wonder if it's a spice issue. Like if you add spices to it, it
I
goes
don't
from
think
being a
so. I
juice
think
to a cider.
it's something with the processing, with the way they do it. But
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
it
Okay.
says here apple cider is fresh and unfiltered, often unpasteurized, whereas apple juice is filtered, pasteurized, and a little bit sweeter.
There you go. I thought it might be that
Okay.
it was the raw stuff, man. That's a
Mhm.
cider. So just crush those apples and drink away. So
All
okay.
right.
So there we go. Moving right along.
Okay, cool. And then we're going into number 7 spot. That's the Imperial or Double Oatmeal Stout, and that is 4.12 on average on Untapped. There is a two-way tie again, and that they're both competing for spot number 5. That's Imperial Double Stout and the Quadruple IPA, which I happen to have one of those for today.
Okay.
Both of those are coming in at 4.14. Is a three-way tie for the number 2 spot, and English barley wine, pastry stouts, Imperial Double or pastry stouts, and Imperial Double coffee stouts. So stouts again are big on the list. All three of these are coming in at 4.15, and the winner overall is the Triple New England Hazy IPA at 4.21. It's a pretty big jump from the ones at the number 2 spot. It's 4.21 versus 4.15. It's the biggest jump from one style to the next, and it is up from 4.19 in 2022.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. It's I don't guess I'm surprised here, but I think a lot of times these bigger beers and like having mead in the list. I mean, I know Untappd kind of covers, like it says, top rated beer styles. I mean, and you've got mead and meads, sizers, mellow mells on there. So little out of their league there, but I think these big beers like this typically do get better ratings as a generality. You get these big boozy beasts out there. Um, Interesting list. Okay,
Yeah.
barley wine, not too surprised. Imperial pastry stout, of course. Adding oatmeal. I mean, a lot of them are just kind of different iterations of the same thing.
Mhm.
Exactly,
So
exactly. Yeah. It's and I've seen stuff in Untapped, and this reminds me of that, where people would say, "Oh, this is great, but I don't rate like a lager above a certain
yeah,
number."
yeah.
So I think I think we've got styles that have that problem. People will rate hazy IPAs and big stouts up to like a 5-point rating, but for some reason they can have just an absolute killer pilsner, but they're like, yeah, they just for a bias against a style just won't rate it above like a 4.0. Like I don't know why that is. It's I think it's a reflection of overall their feelings on the style, not the execution of the style, and so that's why these are interesting, but also kind of skewed.
Well, these are also going to bring a lot more flavor and character to the party. These big styles, big malty beers, pastry stouts. You've got a triple New England IPA there, so that's going to be a lot of malt. You're probably going to have some booziness to it if you're getting in that triple territory. You got the big juice notes to it, so you're going to have the mouthfeel. You're going to have some booze aspect to it. You're going to have that big behemoth, juicy, fruity notes there. So I guess there's beers that you drink and you just enjoy them, but these will just bring a little more to your palate, I guess. So I get it. I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, fair enough. Interesting. Always interesting to take a look at this, no matter how insane it may seem. So, guys, right into our beers of the week, what we're sipping on to wrap the year up. Brian, as always, Brian likes to pregame. Doesn't It's not
Yes.
enough that we're going to be drinking on the show. He's like, you know what? I'm going to get started. So a little Bitburger premium pills to get him started there. Got an interesting collaboration here. Creature Comforts, and this is a collaboration with Our Culture Brewing. This is Seeds Take Up the Soils, which is a sweet potato ale brewed with sorghum, vanilla, and spices. we're going to talk more, not on this show, but about our culture in the future. They were on as part of our Leaders of the Brew School show that we had on a couple of years ago, just talking about, minority brewers, black brewers in the community and what these folks are doing. And there's a big initiative outside of just that collaboration beer that they've done with Creature Comfort. So a lot of cool stuff to talk about there. From Spyglass Hydrodynamics, which is a quadruple IPA there, the big boy. Untitled Art, Nate has got a black seltzer. Nate, tell me about that. What in the world is a black seltzer?
So they used fresh puree in it. My roommate tried it and he said it reminded him of a purple monster. He said it had notes of apple, and I said that I got boysenberry in it. It just had like some real dark fruit flavors to it. Surprisingly enough, it was actually pretty heavy for a seltzer, 7%, which I was shocked by. And
Interesting.
the liquid itself was black, which was very interesting.
Now, you said that Party Nate said it reminded him of a purple monster, and I do
Right.
not know what a purple monster is. So am I supposed to know what a purple monster is?
He said that it was called, it had mango, banana, apple, cherry, cranberry, and the purple monster was called mixed. 2 X's.
Purple, you have not answered my question.
Like Monster Energy drink? Is that what
Yes,
that
I'm
is?
sorry.
Oh,
Yes, like
okay. Yeah.
Monster
Okay.
Energy. Yes.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
sorry about that.
There,
Yeah.
there we
I-
go. All right. It had
I
this. I'm like,
figured-
I'm still not with it there. It's okay. We'll get there, Nate. We'll get there.
It's
eventually.
not
I
Grimace.
figured it had to be that.
Yeah.
I'm like, what else could it be? I've showing my age. I first thought of Grimace from McDonald's, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what? They taste like it. What does this even mean? But
Didn't
okay.
Grimace have a shake that was like killing people or something earlier this
Yeah,
year?
that
Is
came out
something
this year.
along those lines? Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
also from Parish Brewing, Nate's got a Ghost Prime, which is a
Ooh.
cryo hopped Dippa. I am actually going a little bit lighter, sort of here. In honor of one of our stories, I have an Anchor Steam beer here, a little classic Anchor Steam, which is just a good drinking beer. And because I do not let the seasons tell me how to live my life, I have a Sierra Nevada Summerfest that I found
Let's
in the fridge.
go.
So it should still be okay. It's lived in the fridge this whole time. And to really step things up here, one of our favorite local distilleries and one of our favorite local breweries did a collaboration recently. For those watching the live stream, you can see the bottle I've got up here. This is called Outlier number 19 from Independent Distilling. And it is a collaboration with Three Taverns Brewery where they took their Helms Deep, which is a big stout, and they distilled some of it into a beer schnapps. So this is they did a very special release, very limited number. I think these are numbered bottles, Brian, if I remember, 75 bottles total released. So very small
Yeah.
batch stuff. I think Brian bought like 10 of them because he's a hoarder like that. So, but those are fun. They've done a couple other beer schnapps in the past that were fun, and some other really nice spirits. So I've got a little bit of that with me to take 2023 on out of here. So going to enjoy that.
Nice. Well done.
Well, guys, 2023, a lot to look back on here. We kind of itemized chronologically the big stories that we talked about throughout the year, threw in some other things. But if we go all the way back to January of this year, nearly a year ago, nearly a year ago, the big story was New Belgium changed Fat Tire. And that caused quite an uproar there. So, Brian, have you seen, how did this all shake out with the changes in Fat Tire?
So there was a lot of talk about it initially, and some people tried it, and I didn't see really any updates. It happened sort of the same way that Sam Adams around the same time reformulated their Boston Lager. There was a lot of kerfuffle about it not being the same thing, and then it just kind of went away because it was, I don't know, it was January. So um I haven't seen anybody really reference it other than it happened and that was a thing, and that's all there was. So yeah, it was their flagship beer for 30 years, and it was declining in sales. I think they had to revitalize it. So I think that for the majority of people that drink the beer or just drink casually, I think it went unnoticed mostly. I think people just thought it was a
Yeah.
like a brand refresh. So that's what it seems to be. I'm still sad about it because I've had been nursing the last couple that I have. I picked up when the announcement hit because, well, there's a lot of nostalgia in that beer. But
Now, let me ask you this question,
yeah,
Brian. Prior to the change and prior to going to you saying to yourself, oh my gosh, they changed one of my favorite beers from back in the day. When was the last time prior to that you had had a Fat Tire?
it had been a while. I probably in the years, probably.
Yeah, right. So that's my thing. I think a lot of people have the nostalgia connection. And no argument there because I do as well. I thought the same thing. You know, Fat Tire was one of the early craft beers. And Brian, like you and I have talked about, there were times when you'd make a run to Tennessee to get Fat Tire because it wasn't available in Georgia at the time. And no doubt that there were people who Fat Tire was their go-to, was their daily drinker that they loved. But obviously, if New Belgium was changing it, there wasn't that many of those folks left out there. So we got an old and a new version of the beer right as it changed over
Mhm.
and tried them side by side. And in my opinion, the new one was maybe a little lighter, a little bit more drinkable, but definitely felt like it was in the Fat Tire family, you know, maybe a little more athletic brother to the Fat Tire than
Yeah,
so
it's similarities there.
yeah.
I thought, and I thought they were both decent beers. I just think that the original is better. But I mean, again, a bias, nostalgia, that sort of thing, weighing in heavily on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, obviously they made the change for a reason. You know, you have to know these big brewers are doing this. And, you know, no one has ever made a huge change like that and it'd been a mistake. I mean, not like any big soda brand or anything that changed their original formula and had backlash. You know, it's always done for a good reason.
I had been thinking that there would be at some point in the future a reissue of that on a limited basis, like we're going to re-release a limited run of the original to try to reel people in. At the time this happened, I'm like, this could actually be brilliant because the people that drank Fat Tire are going to notice a difference, but they're probably going to find it acceptable enough that they keep drinking it. The people who have nostalgia for it went out and bought all the remaining stock, and then they're going to, if they re-release it at some point on a limited basis, they'll run out and get it again just because of the nostalgia. So you've got,
McRib marketing, baby.
yeah,
It
exactly.
works
You've got
well. Yeah.
the liquid McRib here. So this could be brilliant. It really could.
Well, a local one that's a good example of that, Sweetwater's Exodus Porter. You know,
Yes.
that beer
Mhm.
won medals, and, like, right after it won a medal, they discontinued it,
Yeah.
and every now and then it'll pop back up at the tap room. It showed up at 420 Fest a few years ago, and when it does, I'm excited to see it. That's a really good porter, but I don't know, I didn't keep it in stock in the house before they discontinued it, so, you know, I'm part of the problem, Brian, definitely.
Yeah, and it had the issue of being a great beer, but it not being a super exciting beer in an era where everybody was releasing new and exciting beers constantly, and still are really, but like it was growing, so it was very easy to be distracted by the new things and the mind blowing new styles. So, a well made porter is easy to forget about. So yeah,
Right.
it's a
Yeah,
shame. Yeah.
exactly. And then moving right along, this one hit us personally. So, you know, we're going to cover that to us, it was one of the biggest beer stories of 2023. Maybe not to the country or the larger craft beer community as a whole, but one of our favorite breweries here in Atlanta, good friend of ours, Jason Pellet, was the owner. Orpheus Brewing closes the brewery and tap room. So
Yep.
that was a big one. And I think we'd seen a couple other closures and we've seen more since then, you know, but that was one I think that had a pretty cult following and did some
Mhm.
really unique and interesting beers, big stouts, like true wild ales. You know, he did the Methode Traditionale, you know, types of lambic style and goose style beers. He did big barrel aged stouts. He would do crazy stuff like putting coconuts in a steam cabinet or in a slow cooker for
Months.
3 months to make
Yeah.
black coconut to put into a
Yep.
stout. So he really did some amazing things with that. And, you know, I don't have like any details if there was a specific thing that hit there, but he did go on to partnered with Bevana to keep the brand alive. A couple of these beers are still out there, but this was one. We were there before the brewery opened, celebrated all the anniversaries with them and everything. Really enjoyed a lot of their beers. Brian, I know you stocked up before they closed down to have some of their big beers in there, but I think this one was big for us here locally, symbolically, as to the severity of the overall craft beer landscape.
Yeah, it kind of showed us that making these big, like Untapped still shows them having high ratings, but these big barrel aged beers that once could keep you well flush with cash were not enough to keep you going anymore.
Right.
The thing is Jason has told us at several points in the past that he was never really making a lot of money on these. He put a lot of resources into them, time and money and ingredients and
Mhm.
all that. And it was kind of a labor of love, a passion of his. And the actual money was at some points, I think he was just breaking even on these beers, and it
Yeah.
just didn't seem right. But the problem is to really make money off them, to actually have a viable business model, he would needed to have sold them for much more than he did, and he was already having trouble getting people to buy them at the current prices,
Yeah.
and he was trying to keep it super reasonable. So yeah,
They weren't inexpensive beers. I mean, those
they
big
weren't.
beers that he did,
No.
they were not inexpensive, but there was several years ago, I was talking to a brewer, Peter Kiley, actually from Monday Night Brewing, that he came over from the wine world. And this at the time, he commented there were some beers that he wanted to do, but he knew the price that he would have to charge if he did what he wanted to do, and he didn't think the market would bear that. We also saw, speaking of Helm's Deep, what was it, a few years ago, they did an event release where tickets were like $50 or $75, and there was a huge backlash, and these are beers that use a ton of ingredients. They're aged forever and ever. And I'm not going to speak for the pro, for or against these kind of prices, but wine, steak, all this other stuff, people pay a high price for quality. So, it's something
Correct.
that, if there's the labor and the ingredients and everything going into it, but that is one thing with craft beer. It's an everyman's kind of hobby. You can get a great beer, or used to be able to get a great beer on the cheap, but that may be something. I'm not sure if it's in your list here, Brian, but maybe just beer prices, that throughout the challenges we've faced over the last few years, as we see the prices of a 6-pack creeping up and all of that even craft beer that was something that was totally approachable to everybody, even the prices there are getting a little out of hand.
That is a really good point. The inflation has been an issue all throughout this year. I guess that's from what I've heard, and I don't follow the markets that closely, but I guess inflation's down towards the end of the year, not nearly as high as it was, but mid-year we had pretty high inflation, I think, for like the first half of the year. So everything was getting more expensive, and breweries were getting pinched because their costs are getting more expensive, their ingredients, but the price that the consumer is willing to pay is not going up. And if anything, it may even be going down because they're getting pinched as well in different places. So really the breweries are winding up swallowing some of the costs, which is, I think, why we've seen so many breweries closing this year when we didn't see them. Maybe when we expected during like COVID and such, we didn't see them closing then. I think it's just this price went up and there's not really a relief for it. There's no package out there for people to get inflation relief like there was for like
Yeah.
COVID relief. So
Well, I think talking about COVID and the COVID relief, I think, at least for some, I think we just had a bit of delay there on something that was inevitable. I think some breweries were starting to feel it back when the pandemic hit. And to be honest, some of that, the pandemic money, the COVID money, helped breweries to keep going for a little while. But then when we come out of that, when that money's gone and when consumers are going back as close as possible to normal habits, the breweries just didn't see sales come back like they wanted them to. And breweries
yeah,
continued to open throughout the pandemic. Even this year, although numbers are down, on the net gain of breweries is down, there's still a net positive in the number of new breweries, in the
Yeah.
number of breweries across the US. So there's more beer out there than there was in 2020 when all of this started. Folks' pockets are tighter than they used to be. And there's just a lot of reasons that it's a challenge out there.
And I think that the pandemic changed how people behave because we never saw the return to on-premise drinking the same way we had where it was before COVID. People just they drink more at home basically. That's the new normal, I guess.
Who knows,
It's just
man?
that
Can
people
we use
aren't
that
going
word
out to
anymore?
tap. Yeah,
So,
I don't know. Everything seems so abnormal anymore. Abnormal is the new normal, I guess. I guess that's the moral of the story here.
yeah. Nate, how about you, man? How have your habits changed since the plague was set up on us?
I mean, I definitely agree with Brian. I got used to drinking from home a little bit more, and so the thought of going out and staying out and brewery hopping really changed for me. I do still go out to breweries though, but I usually go to pick up more to-go beer or get a taproom exclusive and then bring it home to share with friends. It's no longer that I've got a huge group going down to a brewery with me and we're hanging out for the day. It's more, oh, let me snag something real quick, take it to go, bring it home with me, and then have a party or just have some people over for dinner here.
Yeah, that was something that I think we've talked about on here before, but I don't feel like that even going to a brewery is the same as it was a few years ago. There was a time when I could drop into any brewery in the Atlanta metro and I would see at least 6 or 10 people that I knew very well.
Mhm.
Basically, I could just roll out on a random weekend, drop into a brewery, and that would be enough to spend a day hanging out with friends. And you don't see that as much as you used to anymore. Maybe it's that people aren't going out as much. Maybe it's that there's so many more breweries that it's more spread out. My 10 friends are now at 10 different breweries on that day, or whatever. But it's different than it was even a few years ago. So
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. And I'm just wondering, as time goes on, people for various reasons, it becomes less of a priority to them to go to their local craft beer place
that's
or
that,
their
man.
local pub. So
Crazy.
yeah,
We're gonna
yep.
see more of it. We've got more to talk about on that topic as well. We're gonna go chronologically here for now, just to make it easy on our simple minds. It's
Yeah.
easiest to do it that way. But moving along in the year, we get to April. And Brian, if I had to pick one story that I would say was the biggest in beer, maybe not craft beer, but the biggest in beer and probably the one with the most impact, this is it. This is
Mhm.
it. So this is when the Bud Light fiasco began. And for those that don't know, if you're listening to our show, there's very little chance that you don't know this story. But someone in marketing at Budweiser made a can with Dylan Mulvaney, who is a trans activist and YouTuber, with her face on the can.
Yep.
I think only a few were made, maybe a 6-pack or something, but they were made as a special thing, sent out, and Dylan did some post showing off the can. A lot of people didn't like that, Brian. A lot of people
Yeah.
didn't like that, Nate. A lot of people got really angry about it, and they did not believe that Bud Light should partner with a trans person at all. They didn't care for it. Now, I totally disagree with that mindset, with hating someone just because of who they are, and with being mad at a company because they chose to partner with someone that you don't agree with their lifestyle. It's different if they partnered with Adolf Hitler. You know,
Yeah.
Dylan's
Just a
not
bit.
doing anything. Dylan's not doing anything to impact anyone else. So if you make a decision, or if you're living how you want to live and living your life, no one has a right to hate you for doing that if you're not doing any harm to them. That's my 2 cents, which is about what it's worth there. But Brian, you got a look. There is a look.
Hey, look, yeah. So I think part of why this exploded is it was reported inaccurately, I believe, that there was a new partnership, and Dylan Mulvaney was going to be the new spokesperson for Bud Light, and that was not the case. And Anheuser Busch was quick to back away from that, releasing a memo that it was just a few cans. It was a special thing for influencers that they do from time to time, and all that. And the problem is that by the time they made that comment, it had already circled the world, and Kid Rock had already
He'd
shot a
already
bunch
shot
of
up some beer, right?
shot up
Yep.
some beer in his backyard with some guns. And yeah, things went crazy really fast. I'm like, they dropped a significant amount of like in sales, like a good 5% or something, almost immediately. It was a significant blip on the radar, and as a result, two of the marketing executives were placed on leave, and eventually, I think that they finally were completely separated from the company, but it was a very quietly, you guys need to go away and be gone. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
And then
wild.
the president went on a talk show and
Yeah.
gave a very non-response
Mhm.
response to things. He's talking about, we care about our employees, we did this and that. He really didn't say anything. This was up in July. It took a while before they really made any comment, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think there was a social media post maybe 2 weeks or a month after, and with really not addressing either side. So they chose not to take either side on anything. They didn't defend, Dylan's right to be a person. They didn't say, yeah, we agree with these folks who hate this. We shouldn't have done that. They didn't say, hey, y'all need to chill and let people be people. So they really took a we're staying out of the way stance, and it just didn't go well with anybody. Everybody was upset with them. So if we look back at this, Bud Light needs to know your audience, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't agree with this at all, but it's not shocking or surprising that these folks responded the way that they did, knowing what you would think the average Bud Light consumer is.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not at all surprised. If anything, I'm almost surprised it wasn't even larger than it was. And I think that
Yeah.
a fair amount of it is there's only a certain percentage of, Bud Light drinkers that even pay attention to the news, probably. So it's entirely possible that some of them only heard rumors and didn't care, because there's a
Yeah.
fair amount of just don't care type of
Just
people
don't
too. So
care. Just
yeah,
don't care.
it's
Yeah.
weird. It's weird that they lost a lot of business from like people that own gay establishments or trans
Mhm.
establishments
Sure.
because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that guy saying these really non-committal things. Like, well, they're not
Yeah.
supporting our side either. Like, you're out. So they lost business on both sides. This was
Mhm.
amazingly badly handled.
I
So
mean, he said things like, "Well, we're here about the employees, and we just want our employees to be taken care of, and this and that." He did. The bottom line is he didn't address the issue at hand at all,
Correct.
at all,
yeah,
and
not even close.
that was something that both sides wanted, to take a stance, and he did not. Now, in response to this, ultra right beer was launched.
Oh yeah,
And there's this fella goes by Conservative Beer Dad. Interestingly enough, he's like one town over from me, and he worked with a contract brewer here in Georgia to make the ultra right beer. And unfortunately, it's done very well. It was his campaign it's an anti woke beer, and people are buying into that now. They've had some challenges because I've had people reach out to me who have ordered the beer, and there's been trouble getting deliveries on some of these. They did a one with a mug shot with the Trump mug shot on the can, and I don't know a lot about it. All I know is he launched the beer. He made a very big point to say that he was anti woke and sick of this. It was in response to the Bud Light, and it did well. There's way more people than there should be that were on board with that. So
yeah, it's really interesting. As popular as it must have been, I've only ever seen it on shelves one time at one establishment, and
well, I think
I found it interesting to even see it because I wasn't. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't 100% sure it was ever going to actually get made. You know.
I think initially it was all mail order. I don't think it went to distribution. So I
Mhm.
think he sold it to be shipped initially, and then it started rolling out. So not seeing it in the stores is not that surprising. But I knew people who have ordered via the website who said that they've ordered like back in September, and as of mid-November, they were still getting emails that, hey, we're waiting on cans, we're trying to get this and that. So, interesting.
Yeah. So
You get
apparently
yours
a
yet,
little bit.
Nate?
Oh, no, I have not gotten mine yet.
Okay. All right.
We've
All
got
Still
right.
a
waiting on it.
we've got a can collecting buddy who I mentioned it to, and I said I've seen it, and he collects all Georgia made cans, and it was made in Georgia. So I told him
Uh-huh.
I told him where I saw it, and if he wants to pick some up just to collect the cans, he seemed non-committal on it.
Yeah, understandable though. He's and the
Yeah.
guy that Brian's talking about, we're talking every single can that he can get of something made in Georgia.
Mhm.
This guy has an insane
Yeah.
collection of Breweriana, so especially Georgia related. So would not surprise me and would be an appropriate piece for his collection. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
it really would
So,
be. It got national headlines, so it's more significant for that reason, just because it was part of a much larger political movement, even if you don't kind of agree with the whole concept behind it. I'm like, it's significant for that reason.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And Brian, then if we get up to May, going into May, big news for us personally in May. Beer Guys Radio, we left the radio. So our name is now a lie. We're Beer Guys Podcast instead of
yeah,
Beer Guys Radio. But, we had been on the radio 6 years. I guess that would have
Mhm.
been right
about
around
right.
6 years. And for those that aren't aware, it's not free to be on the radio.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah.
pay licensing fees and syndication fees and all that. And most of the channels we were on, speaking of certain political affiliations, conservative talk is really where most of the talk is, and that was most of our stations out there. And to be honest, with the exception of a couple, shout out to Tallahassee, Florida, and to Vermont, WVMT up in Vermont. We did well with both of those stations and had quite a few listeners in those areas. They were really good. A couple others we saw some pockets, but overall we were under pretty strict requirements as to what we could do as far as the format of the show and what we did. And we just felt it was best to make that break and go all podcasts. We didn't see the
Yeah.
benefit of continuing to put money into being on the radio. And Brian, I know you admit it, and I got to say I did as well, that, part of the hang on for that is it was kind of cool to be on the radio. It was
It
cool.
was.
We were nationally syndicated. I think at one time we hit 75 stations, 60, 75. I don't even remember now. At one time I could tell you exactly, but
Yeah, I think with all the simulcast stuff, we were
yeah,
probably 50, 60, something like that.
yeah.
So yeah,
We had people that caught us on in Guam
that's
that
right.
Mhm.
sent us emails and heard us in Guam, which I mean that was super cool being seen out there. But now we get to sit down, we get to chat with you. We don't have to, stick to a radio clock and take a break in the middle of the conversation. We can just keep rambling and running our mouths for your enjoyment. That's you're welcome. You're welcome for our loudmouths.
Indeed, indeed. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And then, something that there's going to be a theme throughout the rest of the year, Brian, in May, AB getting rid of their craft breweries. AB has spent a lot of time the previous years buying up various craft breweries and building their portfolio. But Appalachian Mountain Brewery is the one that they bought back their brewery from AB InBev. So some other moves that were made there, but the owners there, they got their brand back. Constellation Brands exiting the craft beer. They're exiting craft beer. So
Yeah.
they got rid of they had Funky Buddha in Florida and Four Corners Brewing Company in Texas. Both of those went back to the original owners. So these big macro brands that were grabbing up these craft breweries, some are going back to who had them before. Funky Buddha was one. I think that was one. That was another one I think people took kind of personal because if you
Yeah.
remember Wicked Weed, when AB bought Wicked Weed, there's always been some chatter about craft breweries selling to big beer. And right here, I mean, Terrapin ATL Brew Lab is a sponsor of the show. A lot of these breweries, they have very good reasons for selling. I'd still much, much prefer a local, independently owned craft beer, but I go to the Terrapin Atlanta Brewery. I know those guys. They're working in my neighborhood. They're right here in my backyard. I know Spike that owns Terrapin and what he said this did for his, for his company. Not my preference for the way things go, but I don't feel as strongly anti selling out, quote unquote, as I did 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. I get it. But Wicked Weed was so verbal about craft and independence and all this stuff. And then it was almost like overnight, they're like, hey, we sold to AB, and then
Yeah.
right after that, they
Mhm.
did a video. This was around the time that the Brewers Association released that logo for the independent breweries. It was like a beer bottle upside down. And what's AB's craft? Is it the high end? Is that what they
I think
call
they
it?
called
Their
it the
craft?
high end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Well, several of the craft brewers that they had just purchased did a video basically saying, "Hey, y'all, we need to all play together here. We need to unite against wine and spirits." And to me, that just seems so hypocritical to go. They did such a 180. And talking to some of the other breweries in Asheville, the Wicked Weed one, people didn't forget that. That's the local craft community didn't forget that. Funky Buddha, I went off on a huge tangent there, but Funky Buddha was much the same way. They were very craft, and people didn't really like at all that they had been purchased by Big Beer. So, but now
yeah,
back in, I haven't had them recently, Brian. Are they? I don't know if they made a huge change in the quality when they were sold, or if quality has changed again in the other direction since they're back under independent ownership.
I haven't really had much either, and it's the amount of their beer I do have had lately has been smaller. I think that there's still a little bit of distro here, or maybe there's some remaining stock. It's been kind of weird with Funky Buddha. So
Yeah,
they were definitely a
who knows?
much bigger thing, 5 or 6 years ago than at least in this area. I got to point out that Constellation also, they've made so many bad steps when it came to beer, that craft beer, that maybe getting out of craft beer was good, because I think they're sticking kind of to more their Mexican imports. But they're the ones that bought Ballast Point for $1
Ballast Point,
billion
right?
in
Yeah,
2015, and then sold it to Kings and Convicts for like $41 million.
$40 or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
$41 million 5 years later. That is
Jeez,
that is really painful to think about. So they
that's
have
crazy.
they have done a very poor job in this. So craft beer is not for them. That's for sure.
Hey, I guess it only took them $1 billion to realize it, but way
Only a
to go
billion.
on figuring that one out, Constellation. Way to go.
Eventually they got it, and they're still afloat. And you know what?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
just goes to show how powerful the Mexican import beer market is right now. That's
yeah.
like that they can take
You
that
know,
$1 billion hit, and they're still just chugging along. They sold off the brands that they weren't servicing well anyway, and they're chugging along. Okay.
as we go through these stories, Brian, I realize that a lot of the biggest stories in craft beer had to do with big beer getting their hands in the pot there. So
Yeah.
a lot of the stories are attached to that and related, Brian. As we move into July, a big one that is still playing out right now. But Brian, I think you put it very well. Very well. Sapporo destroys an American icon. Sapporo shut down Anchor Brewing Company. And again, I'm drinking one of their, this is probably one of the few cans left, Brian, or not anymore, was
Mhm.
one of the few cans left
Yeah.
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Anchor Steam beer. But that is another one I think for a lot of people symbolically, even if I can't say anything, Brian. I can't complain too much. In the last decade, probably Anchor Christmas is the only Anchor beer that I have purchased. So, I'm sure just like we talked about earlier with the Fat Tire, there's people who steam beer was their go-to. I'm sure, locals there where the brewery was were a lot more attached to it. Me, it was about the nostalgia. It was about what it stood for. Fritz Maytag buying the brewery and really, one of the first craft breweries, some of the pioneers. So to see someone who had so much meaning in craft beer in general be closed by a big mega brewery just because it doesn't fit into the balance sheet anymore sucks.
Yeah, and it just seemed like it was handled so poorly. It was kind of, yeah. It seems like they went out of their way. Now there was the claim at the time when it came out that it had been losing money for since 2016. It had just been losing market share, losing money, and there were attempts to that they claim to have made to sell it. But it also seems like they went out of their way to quickly announce that they were closing it down and quickly putting it into a special kind of alternative, and I forget what that was called, to the chapter, the various bankruptcies. I think I got it in my notes. Assignee to liquidate the business assets. It's called the California Assignment of the for the benefit of creditors. So it's an entirely
Okay.
different thing
All
that they
right.
went through, and it seemed like it was almost designed to prevent what the employees of the brewery that were interested in buying it. They were not presented with that option, and yeah, that's something that came out quickly. Is they were working on they had very little notice that this was happening, and they were quickly trying to see what resources they could put together to buy the brewery and keep it running, which would have been ideal, and I guess is still a possibility based on the emails I've seen, even this much later than the announcement. So
Yeah,
who
I
knows?
mean, they started like a GoFundMe type
Yeah.
of campaign to
Mhm.
raise funds. So I think they got a long road ahead of them to try and make that happen. It seems difficult, unlikely. I wish them the absolute best, and I would hope that if they're still going at it, then they have a plan. They're not going into this blind, not knowing what they're getting into. So
They have a
hopefully,
lot of support, and I think the last email I saw is they needed additional funding to keep it moving. So I think it's not
yeah.
dead. And I know there was some sort of a strange update saying that I think they were piecing out the brewery to make it very difficult to buy the
Mm,
whole thing and make it run again. I think the property went up for sale separately, and I think that was announced like I want to say October-ish. I don't have that in my notes, so I think it's still possible though they could all come back together and work again, but it seems increasingly like a long shot. But I
so
haven't heard
one
anybody
thing,
say it has been sold, so I don't know.
right? Haven't heard the final word yet. So that's another thing. We've heard a lot of breweries. A lot of the breweries that have closed have commented that rent prices are really getting them. We saw increases in rent announced by several, and this isn't brand new. Our friend Crawford Moran, when he closed Slice and Pint 6 years ago now or something, I don't know, but when he closed it, he mentioned it was due to a rent hike. When 5 seasons. So this isn't something that's new, but it's getting worse. And a lot of these breweries, especially in Georgia, and I think this kind of happened a lot around the country until laws changed, until craft beer started becoming more popular. But until laws changed in Georgia, it was not uncommon at all for a brewery to go into kind of a lower rent industrial park kind of place.
Mhm.
Because in Georgia, the way you made money from beer was distribution. You
Correct.
weren't looking to get people into your tap room until 2017. You weren't looking to get people into your tap room to drink. You were wanting to brew and get it out to the taps.
Mhm.
So these places went into some of these places when craft beer got popular. People started coming to the breweries, hanging out, and a lot of these places were revitalized because of craft breweries coming in there and them helping these places to be successful. Price them out of their own rent in
Yeah.
these locations. We look at a recent case. We look at it, Monday Night Brewing, when they opened the garage location down in Atlanta's West End. They were the first tenant in that huge building there. And now there's
Mhm.
an entire beverage destination, I guess is probably a fair way to say it. There's
Yeah.
3 breweries, a distillery, kombuchery, restaurants and all that. But someone had to take that plunge, and the craft brewers were the ones to do it, and they're paying the price for that now. And I think it sucks. And Brian, the reason I rambled all this in regards to Anchor Brewing, that building and location in San Francisco has to be insanely valuable there. So I could
It
see
is.
someone wanting the brewery and just that land and building pricing them out of everything else. So,
Mhm.
I saw it mentioned somewhere that that whole area is a big hot spot for artificial intelligence startups, and there was the speculation that the property would be bought and a startup would take over and use that facilities for artificial intelligence. So go from beer to artificial intelligence, maybe.
yeah,
Again, haven't heard anything about the property being sold yet, so it's unknown what's happening, and
yeah. I
we'll
hope
see.
whatever happens that they're able to survive, revive, pull a Lazarus move, whatever you want to call it at this point. But I would like to see Anchor Brewing continue. And again, just for me, it's purely the symbolic nature of what they stand for in craft beer.
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
Fun, fun, fun. Well, not really. That's the wrong
No,
thing to say, Tim.
the
Not
opposite of
fun,
fun.
fun, fun at all. So yeah, again in July, just more continuation of the AB stuff. They gave AB gave away free beer for the 4th of July. They did so many things to try and encourage
Yeah.
people, to get their beer. Not going to give that any more time, but they keep trying to pull little things. So this is a story. The next one is something, Brian, that we've talked about probably for a couple years now. And we talked when I think it was earlier this year when we did Little Beer Fest over in Duluth. We had Augie Carton on the show from Carton Brewing up in New Jersey. And he was talking about the laws there. And he mentioned he was on with us with John Hall from All About Beer. And they mentioned coming into Atlanta and leaving the airport and going to Halfway Crooks Brewing. And he's like, oh, I wonder if I'll be able to get something to eat there. And he's like, oh, of course I will, because this is a normal state. Now, that's a recent change, Augie. But anyhow, in New Jersey, you can't do that. So they can have food trucks, but they can't even tell you if they've got a food truck. You got to kind of show up and maybe it's there or not. I don't know the details of the laws. I know they're crazy, and I know that's one example that Augie gave us. I know that with the way licensing works there's like a finite number of liquor licenses, and people can set on these things. They can pay the renewal fee and not open it. So if someone by chance had 4 licenses for some reason, or I don't know if that's possible. I'm kind of speaking out. But if they had a license and they didn't want someone else to be able to open, and they could just pay the renewal fee and set on that thing. They don't have to open it. And that was one thing that they were trying to, I believe the governor wanted changed when the governor of New Jersey vetoed a bill. He vetoed a beer bill to change these crazy laws in New Jersey. Now that sounds worse, I think, Brian, than what it actually is, or maybe good intentions there with bad results. But he wanted more changes done. And one of the things he wanted done was the state's ability to pull a license. If someone was renewing it, a non-used license, to be able to pull that from someone rather than letting them just, pay and renew it like that. But the punchline to this, that is news that just came out this month, is due to the veto, it doesn't look like they're going to get back in to make the changes that the governor wants in order to be able to pass and sign the bill, unless the state of New Jersey gets some relief from the Alcohol Beverage Commission. Then these old, very stringent laws will go back into effect January 1st. And they've had a little bit of a reprieve. They got to pass like a 6-month pass or something while they were looking at this, looking at this bill. But since the bill was not signed into law, those expire at the end of the year. And the restrictive laws are going to go back into effect come January 1st.
Yep. Unless there's some sort of a last minute ditch effort to save it. And it seems unlikely, but I guess anything is possible when people are, I don't know. I think there's a lot of posturing that governor really wants some things, and maybe he'll get it. Maybe last minute the pressure will be enough that the people bring him something that he'll decide to sign. I'm sure he'll give ground on some things, but yeah, it's going to be a mess there, man. I do not envy anybody who enjoys beer in New Jersey right now.
I feel bad for the brewers there. I mean, we've seen the restrictive laws. We're still trying to improve our laws here in Georgia, but things are crazy all over the place. Every state has some things. New Jersey sounds pretty bad. But Brian, before we move on, let's thank our sponsors, the folks that help us to pay the bills here at Beer Guys Radio to cover our costs to keep the show going. We've almost made it through 2023. I was going to say we made it through, Brian, but not quite. There's still time. There's still time. But if you do make it through 2023, you definitely deserve some new beer for the new year. So our friends at Terrapin Brewery Atlanta always keep some new stuff on tap. I recently chatted with our buddy Mark over there. He was telling me about all the cool stuff they're doing and a few of the new beers that they've got on there, or newer beers on there. One they've got on is Gold Glove. This is a deep gold, crisp, and malty Dortmunder lager. He said it's incredibly balanced drinkability and 5.5% ABV. So got a little bit there for you, but not too strong. Now, something we're going to talk about this story a little bit more, Brian. Kokua project that we talked about earlier in the year. Big story, a massive multinational collaboration with this brew to support the Maui wildfire efforts and the cleanup from the results there. Right now, Terrapin Brewery Atlanta has their version of Kokua on tap, and again, supports those in Maui. And this is a sessionable IPA. They mentioned that it has bright notes of passion fruit and pineapple from Mosaic hops. Now, if we're talking hops, Brian, there's still new hops coming out there. So if we want to talk some of the good stuff going on in beer, there's new hops always happening out there. One that is new this year is called Vista. Now, it's been around under part of the USDA's public breeding program for a few years now, but this is the first year that this hop has been more widely commercially available. Well, our buddies at Terrapin got some of this. They have brewed a beer called Farm System, and this is a fresh hop IPA, again, brewed with this Vista hop variety. And when they tasted this was back in 2019 when brewers did a blind tasting of this hop. They noted tropical fruit, tangerine, melon, pear, and green tea, Brian. So I think a lot of the popular hops right now, we get those tropical juicy flavors in there, but when you bring in some of those unique notes in there, like a green tea or the pear and melon, it's really finite differences that separate some of these. But fun to check them out and see what's going. So again, they've got it over there, Farm System on tap. Go up there, whether it's the old year or the new year, get you a beer, maybe go there both. You probably want a beer on both sides of 2024, but go on, have a seat at the bar, order up a pint, tell them the beer guy sent you. And as always, thanks to our friends at Terrapin Brewery Atlanta for sponsoring the show.
And so, of course, like you were saying, a new year is upon us. And I think it's got people thinking about resolutions. And you could join the hordes of people hitting the gym in January, thinking that 2024 is the year you're finally going to become that professional bodybuilder you've always dreamed of being. More power to you if that's your thing. But I'm going to tell you what my resolution is for 2024. I like to set myself up for success. So it's one I'm pretty sure I can stick to. I resolve to have a new beer every time I visit Truck and Tap. That means, for example, if I were to drop by the Woodstock location of Truck and Tap today, instead of ordering that Creature Comforts Double Cocoa Bunny that I've had many times and really enjoy and will definitely recommend, I would instead order something I've not had, like Omegang's Three Philosophers Nitro, like the Nitro's key there. I've not had that. I know this is going to be an easy resolution to keep because each Truck and Tap location has 20 beers to choose from, and the selections are always changing. There's always a new beer on tap at Truck and Tap. And of course, you don't need to make a resolution to visit Truck and Tap. You can just drop by any of their locations, Woodstock, Alpharetta, Duluth, or Lawrenceville, whenever you want, and have whatever beverage suits you. It doesn't even have to be beer. You can have some wine or a cocktail or just it's bourbon. You can just have bourbon if you want. When you show up, just let them know that the beer guys sent you for your visit. So yes, thank you to Truck and Tap for the sponsoring. We appreciate you. We love you guys.
No more beer for Brian.
He's
having trouble there. So
that's right.
Brian will not be visiting Truck and Tap just for a little while. He's going to take
tonight.
it easy
not
for
tonight.
just a minute there.
Yeah.
So thanks, y'all. We appreciate it. Brian, moving right along. This is an interesting one. I think a big theme this year: closers, mergers, acquisitions, sell-offs, rebuys. I think that's really the big thing here. But looking into August, Tilray Brands bought 8 beer and beverage companies from Anheuser-Busch. So as AB was looking to sell off their portfolio, some going back to the original owners, Tilray purchased those. And Tilray has fairly quietly, I don't think there's been a lot of hype around this, but they are now, by the Brewers Association definition, the 5th largest craft brewer in the United States. They have Sweetwater, Alpine, Green Flash. I don't even remember all of them right now, but in addition to the ones that they've recently purchased from AB.
Yeah, they've got they picked up Shock Top in this deal that they just did. It was $85 million for 8 craft brands, and some of them aren't breweries, or they're not beer breweries. There's a cider company, there's an energy drink company, but Shock Top, Breckenridge Brewery, Blue Point Brewing, 10 Barrel, Red Hook, Widmer, which I'm really hoping to see Widmer show up at the local tap room here, because that's one that takes me back, especially that Widmer Hefeweizen.
Classic,
and
the old vintage.
Yeah. And they've got Square Mile Cider Company and Highball Energy. Those were the 8 they bought up. So yeah, they're growing like gangbusters. It's crazy, and they're getting these for a deal. $85 million for all these. It's just nuts.
I mean, it's crazy. Like we were talking about with Ballast Point, it bought for $1 million, sold for $1 billion, sold for $41 million. Just absolutely insane there. So I'm curious to see what Tilray is up to next. Are they done, or are they keeping an eye out for what's next? I mean, they're all over weed and beer So,
Yeah,
they've got that going on.
yeah, it'd be interesting. So I would guess that I haven't studied their portfolio, but I would be thinking they'd be looking at any regions of the country that they don't have as strong a footing in, and they would be possibly looking to add there if they're continuing to add. But they just bought 8, and I think that there might be some time where they need to integrate these companies to get everything working properly. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if they took their time with it. But you know what? Hey, if you can get more breweries for a discount, maybe you do that. I
Take
don't
advantage of
know.
the
I
sale.
really don't know how that works. So I hope it works out for him. It's pretty amazing.
I know last time you and I went down to the Sweetwater tap room, they did have Green Flash and Alpine beers on tap. And that was probably a month after this purchase. And none
Yeah.
of the other brands were there yet. So I'm sure it does take a little while. Or one other, I think. Didn't they have like some 6 or
Montauk.
12 packs? Montauk.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Montauk
Montauk,
was
yeah.
there. Yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
those. Yes.
Yeah. So, but we'll look and see. Like you said, see if what maybe Widmer and some of the others. What was Widmer's bourbon? I think it was
Yeah.
BRRRBON
Yeah, that
or
was a good
something.
one too. Yeah, yeah. The
That was a good one.
Hefeweizen and the bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Those were hype beers 10, 12 years ago, probably
yes, yeah,
somewhere in there.
like a
Yeah.
decade ago.
About a
The
decade ago.
Hefeweizen was going back even further, back when
Yeah.
Hef was the big style. That's 20 years ago,
The
probably
90s,
more.
back in the
Yeah,
90s.
yeah,
You remember
crazy.
the 90s, Nate? He was
Somewhat.
wearing underoos. He was wearing
I
underoos
was
back
wearing
then.
underoos back in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff, man. Rolling on, Brian. I don't know. This is one of the biggest beer stories of 2023 or not, but you thought it was significant. So you had a little revelation there in October, right?
Oh yeah, I took a new job, and people were asking me about beer, and I realized when I was answering the question that my favorite beer style really isn't IPA anymore. It's the German Pilsner. I just realized that's the one I still drink plenty of IPA. I still like IPA, but I gotta say that given the choice, I'm probably going to pick the Pilsner most of the time. And
Probably picking
it
Pilsner.
dawned on me in October when I was being asked about it. I'm like, oh my god, I don't love IPA more than everything else anymore. I don't know when it happened exactly, but that's when I realized it. So big news
Yeah.
for me, big personal news.
Yes, and you know what, Brian? Sometimes those are the most important news stories. I
Yes,
am glad that you had a revelation in
yeah,
October. I hope it has been fruitful and made you a better person.
I think it has. I think it
Good,
has.
good.
Thank you very much.
Now, I mean, as a sidebar to you discovering that you liked, German pills, Creature Comforts. This was a big story, and I think even though Georgia related, I think the overall message here was pretty big. So, earlier in the year, was this even going into 2022, Brian, when they started the union efforts? So, a
I
group
believe
of
so.
Creature Comforts employees got together and fast forward a couple of steps, but they formed Bug, the Brewers Union of Georgia. And they were trying to unionize Creature Comforts. A lot of back and forth. There was a lot of accusations from the people at Bug. Creature Comforts, of course, remained fairly silent. They retained an attorney that is known to help avoid union efforts, basically, and went to defend this. Of course, a lot of what actually happened isn't going to be known to the public. Creature Comforts is not the type that's going to put their dirty laundry out there. They're going to take care of business. But the end to all of this was in October. They did get a vote for the union, and that vote failed.
Yeah,
So after all this hubbub going on, and I think, Brian, my personal take in this day and age is that if a union vote fails, that says a lot. That really speaks
Mhm.
volumes because, to be quite honest, with a lot of the people in the workforce, especially, Brian, in service industry or industrial related jobs, unionization is very appealing.
yeah.
The thoughts of what you could get out of that. So, for whatever reason, we don't know the inner workings on it, but I think it says quite a lot that the union vote failed there at the brewery.
Yeah, I think it does. I really do. And there was and I'm curious how much this figures into it, but somebody on Reddit, I think it was fairly anonymously, commented that some people voted against the union because the union wasn't clear about their communicating what they were demanding, and that there was some stuff going on that they were non-transparent about. There was a comment about secretly electing a non-employee president of the union, and I could see
Weird.
for
Okay.
thinking about
Mhm.
forming a union, getting leadership that doesn't know anything about the brewery, somebody from the outside, seems strange to me. So, yeah, it's I wonder. And here's the thing: when they talk about founding the union initially, when they were before it was known that Creature Comforts wasn't going to embrace them, they were talking about spreading the ethos, the spirits, the values of Creature Comfort to other breweries in Georgia. It was kind of this interesting messianic kind of message that they had, and then things changed very quickly when Creature Comforts didn't embrace them. So it's very odd. I'm like, it did seem like Creature Comforts was kind of trying to be the ideal employer as a brewery in the state already, and it seemed weird to me that that would be the place that you would choose to unionize. So, anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
Yeah.
Brian, it's hard to read into what's being said in an internet post, or things like that.
yeah, true,
We know several of the owners, managers, taproom workers at Creature Comforts. Based on all of my interaction with them, I was shocked to hear that they were the brewery that unionized ahead of any others. Um, because someone speaks, talks a good talk doesn't mean they necessarily practice what they preach. But in all of my dealings with the guys there, with the crew there, they always seem legit in my opinion. Bugs post when they came out, something didn't set right with me. And again, Brian, I'm going off of an internet post, so you got to be careful saying this or that or anything because I don't know the inner workings of what's going on. But some of the things that we're saying, and like you saying, well, like your comment about them wanting to take the ethos of Creature Comforts, we believe that they can be, certain choice words that they use there. But it went from this talk to fairly accusatory and angry fairly quickly, and they never publicly said a whole lot about what they wanted out of the union, and they were trying to get a lot of public support, but beyond we want to unionize, there wasn't a lot said to garner public support. And apparently not just the public, but like that person mentioned on Reddit, they just didn't have enough to confidently vote in the union there. So it was an interesting ride, I think, and who knows if it's over yet.
it's possible it's not. I think there was some possibility of their appealing the decision that was made or something like that. But I think that they also had the downside of the people starting the union didn't have any experience working with unions, so it was kind of they were figuring it out as they went. So they did have that disadvantage if their messaging wasn't right. I mean, it's possible that it could have been at least partly because they weren't sure how to do these
How to
things.
do
They'd
it?
never
Yeah.
done it before. So, giving them the benefit of the doubt, because I don't know. There's a lot
Sure.
just we don't know. We're
But
on the
that's
outside of
something
the story. Yeah.
if you're going for something like unionizing, then you either need to know what you're doing, or you need to be really good buddies with somebody who does, you know.
Mhm.
Yes.
So interesting. Well, Brian, as we roll into the last couple of months of the year, it's been spicy in the beer world
It
the last
has.
couple of months of the year. There's been a lot of drama, controversy, something again tied locally, but not just dealing with local breweries. But we've talked about Bevana several times on here. We had Aaron Gore on earlier in the year. Aaron was an employee of Bevana. I would say part that adds to the spiciness here. Although there was no although there was no public comment made as to why, Aaron did resign from Bevana earlier this year, a couple of months ago. But we have seen Pontoon Brewing here in Georgia. They had to close their doors. They said, hopefully temporarily, depending on what they could work out. But they directly said that it had to do with a partnership not paying them six figures that they owed them, that the financial hit was there. Some other places did stories that dove deeper into what was going on with Bevana, but it sounds like there was a lot of undelivered promises for what they could accomplish with brewers. And as we dug into this, Brian, I believe the story was that Good Beer Hunting that did the big kind of deep dive on Bevana there.
Yeah, it was Good Beer
So,
Hunting. Yeah.
but their plan was increasing sales through distribution and national accounts. I think we know from being attached to craft beer, distribution is not the way to go or grow a brewery right now. And finally, finding national chain accounts for a portfolio of fairly unknown breweries other than in their local markets seems anyhow, it seems like their business model was flawed on what their growth plans were. And it sounds like the promises that they made to some of the other breweries did not pan out the way they told them would in the terms of sales volume. But there's a lot of lawsuits involved from brewers to this. The bank is accusing the parent company of selling off some assets that were used to secure a loan and not paying back their debt. So there's just a lot going on with Bevana right now. And I think it still remains to be seen how that shakes out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. They seem to still be moving the beer along. I still see, Orpheus out there. Yeah, they've partnered with them. So some of the Orpheus that's still on the market right now is being produced through Bevana and Jester King. I've seen things
Yeah,
about them.
yeah.
So they seem to be very happy with the program. So not everybody involved with Bevana has had a bad experience. Jester King, I think, has got distribution to a lot of states now that they didn't have before through Bevana, which is handy for them. But it seemed to me like, yeah, like you were saying, that model, it needed a tremendous amount of volume. Like, it would have played out well if the volume was there, but you needed volume and you needed demand. So you needed larger breweries to be working on this, and you needed the demand that was like craft beer in 2016 and 2017.
Right.
You need that kind of demand to
Mhm.
support it. So it would have worked in that case, but we're not in that world anymore.
Nope, not at all. Brian, some
Yeah.
others, Treehouse Brewing. Owners are being sued there, said that they were pulling money. They weren't giving minority shareholders the stake that they deserve there. A lot going on with Treehouse. Brian, I've lost my notes, but there was a brewery in Colorado that went through a very similar situation where they said there was misappropriation of funds from a former manager. There's a lot of lawsuits going on
Yeah.
in craft beer right now. A lot of accusations and lawsuits there. So
I think it's a matter
crazy stuff.
I think it's a matter of as things get tighter and you have to look at the books and figure out how to make ends meet, you start seeing stuff that looks a little hinky. And that's where
Yeah.
some of the stuff that, I'm not saying anybody's actually done anything wrong here, because I don't know. I can't know this. But that's where you reveal these issues, and then you realize, oh, somebody has been stealing, and that's where you go to court. And
Yeah.
but when money is flowing in hand over fist, just dump truckloads of money, you're not worried about it. So that's where you can get away with stealing money. It's times like these that show it. And
Yeah,
with
when
the
when you're
inflation,
sharpening that pencil, right? Yeah.
yeah, the inflation is the tide has gone out, and you can see everything that's there on the beach, and then you see where people are stealing, maybe, possibly,
Crazy
allegedly,
stuff,
Allegedly.
man. Allegedly stealing.
allegedly stealing. Yeah,
That's like they'll catch someone on camera shooting somebody and they'll be like the alleged shooter. I was like, he's
that's right.
literally right there. Literally
It's,
right there.
he gives a peace sign to the camera, like, yeah,
Yeah.
allegedly.
Holds
Yeah,
up his driver's license and so you
that's
can
right.
see. Yeah. That's it. He's just accused right now. No one's been
Yep,
convicted. So
that's right.
well, guys, those were some of the big stories throughout the year. We had a lot of fun. We talked about a ton of stuff. There were some themes that I think we harped on a little bit that kind of stuck with us. So, some personal passion projects, or maybe just things that entertain us. Brian, what was the thing for you this year?
It was a I think the thing that I was most interested in, follow the closest this year, was probably the Anchor saga, and
Okay.
the destruction of an American icon by it's a company that seems to be just completely clueless as to how important that is. So that seemed to be the big story for me, the one I was always looking for some sort of an outcome to. And I'm kind of sad that we don't have an idea as to how it's actually going to end yet. It's still unknown. Maybe we'll know in 2024 if that even is a real year. We'll find out what's going to happen then.
We'll see.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Nate, how about you? What was your thing for 2023?
It really was the Bud Light fiasco because
Okay.
I
Yeah.
was amazed at how much market share they had lost as a result of a marketing plan that a new executive tried to enact, and it just blew my mind. The they did everything except apologize, or they did everything except like they tried to give away beer. They were offering mail-in rebates on
Yeah.
beer if you sent them their receipts. They did everything except just take responsibility for their
Yeah.
actions and just try and make it right for one of the sides.
Yeah, either
Right,
side. Yeah.
good point, Nate. That hey, we got free beer here. They were giving, big incentives to distributors and stuff.
Mhm.
Tried everything they could. Hey, it's 4th of July. Get you some free Bud Light.
Yeah.
Hey, could you just apologize? Free beer,
No,
free
free
beer.
beer.
Would you like a puppy? So
Yeah.
they were putting live puppies in 12 packs of Bud Light. I don't know if anybody knew that, but you got
I didn't see that.
a free
No.
puppy in your
I
12
missed
pack
that
of
one.
Bud Light. So yeah, but you're right. I never really thought about it exactly like that. It's like we've tried literally nothing and it just hasn't worked.
That's
So,
right.
crazy. I think something that entertained me throughout the year, there's a lot of negativity, but y'all, I had some fun. I had some fun talking Micheladas this year. My Midwest Michelada, other variations on it. I drank several this year. Had some good taco spots here. Um, I don't think it was this year, but at our friends Good Word Brewing, I asked them if they did a Michelada one time, and the bartender's like, "Well, we can." And I saw him where we were sitting. I could see the bartender mixing it, and he mixed it up and he put a straw in it and took some out. If you've ever seen the way a bartender does, they'll pull some up in a straw to taste it and see how it was. And he tasted it and he shook his head and he dumped it in the sink. And I'm like, you know what, man, that says a lot right there. If he's like, nope, this isn't the one. This isn't the one. He
Mhm.
redid it. And I'm going to tell y'all, it was one of the best Micheladas I've had in my life. But that being said, I'm also okay with just a beer and some V8 juice with maybe some salt, pepper, and hot sauce. I'm totally okay with that. Nate, do not ever put Underberg in my Bloody Mary or Michelada again. I don't know why that was a thing, but
It tasted so
and
good.
y'all, we're gonna try. We found. I'm trying to remember the name of the Twitter account. I think it maybe be Irish Beer History was the Twitter account, but they posted a pamphlet that Guinness had in the 70s talking about various concoctions. And one they had, I think it was called the Redhead, which is a mix of Guinness and tomato juice. And y'all, I like the Micheladas. I'm gonna try that. I think I'm gonna hate it, but I'm gonna try it. So, and Brian, you and I went out last weekend, and we went to a kind of a European pub, I guess British Irish, kind of a little of both there. But they had the one that was cola in
Yeah, Trojan
Guinness,
horse.
the Trojan horse, and we
Yeah,
tried that. You know what? Those are pretty complementary flavors.
it
That
worked.
played well
Yeah,
together there.
it
So
worked, which is crazy. But
that one
I
did
wasn't sure what to make of
absolutely.
it. I was going to attempt to do that redhead or whatever the heck that was, and I brought a can, but it turns out it was a vegetable juice. It
You had the
wasn't tomato
V8
juice.
blend, yeah,
Yeah, so it would
yeah,
have been like a it would have been like a Michelada made with Guinness. I don't know. That
madness.
still might have been all right, but so I haven't tried that yet.
You
Um,
have to get you some Guinness and tomato juice and give it a shot. See what you can do there.
I need to do that.
Yeah.
This makes me think about the spaghetti that we talked about
Oh, yes. Okay.
excessively,
Mhm.
Yeah.
especially during the summer. And I even went out and bought some Miller Lite just to make spaghettis, and I was experimenting with a couple different ways of doing that. Yeah, for a minute, for a minute, that was a hot thing. I was kind of obsessed with the spaghetti. So
Not for a minute.
Oh,
I had a 12-pack of spaghetti last night with other people, not just by
I was
oh,
myself.
like,
I was gonna say,
party on, Nate.
wow,
Party
12-pack,
on, Nate.
nice.
Good stuff, man. Nate, any predictions for beer in 2024?
We saw reports from the Brewers Association about brewery openings versus brewery closings. And while it was close, it was still in the positive. I think next year we're going to see that opening and closing be even or in the negatives. I think more breweries are going to close next year than we'll see open.
All right. All right. Brian, any thoughts, predictions?
I think that
pontification. Is that the right word?
I think that we will continue to see the loggers and the proliferation of loggers and everything to do with loggers, and that's going to continue to be a thing. I think it's going to continue to be popular. I think that we may start to see more casks, like that article we had recently. I think earlier, like at the beginning of this month, more cask beer and more focus on the value of foam in beer and what it provides and how to properly pour your loggers and anything else that you're doing. I think that
Okay.
we'll see a lot of that. Nitro may in fact make the comeback. I've already started seeing it more places than I have in a while. So I think that's what we're going for. I think
All
the
right.
quality of the pour and the lighter beers, the lagers, yeah, we're getting away from pastry and intense flavors. Probably is what I'm thinking.
Okay. I think we'll continue to see loggers going. You know, the Pilsner, it's here. People are loving it. I've been predicting for 7 years that it was the next big thing, and I guess if you do it long enough, if you luck up, then maybe it will. Brian, I'm gonna go against you on cask ales. I do not think the American consumer is going to get on board with that on a large scale. I think it's going to be a little something you see at a few places where diehards that really love cask ales go to get their cask ales. I just don't think that's something that the American consumer is going to buy into. Um, there'll be you and Owen Ogletree and the 5 other people in Atlanta that love cask ales that will show up at places. And you know what? We've got 2 cask mark certified places in the Atlanta metro, Brickstore Pub and Good Word Brewing, and they do very fine cask ales if that's your thing. I am not personally sold on cask ales, although there's a couple cask ales I've had that I thought were stellar. I'm not sold on that being the thing, and I don't think the American consumer will be as well. So let's see. Let's catch back up in a year and see where we stand with that. Now, I've got a interesting. I don't know if I'm going to call it a prediction or a hope for 2024, and something I've seen recently is that more breweries in the Atlanta area are getting pinball machines.
Oh,
And I think that something pinball is having a moment. For those that aren't aware, maybe over the last year, pinball started to come back, more popularity. There's pinball arcades opening up again, breweries and bars. Some bars that used to have half a dozen arcade machines have got rid of all of those and put in pinball machines. I think also that's good for craft beer that pinball's having a moment because people are looking for stuff to do at their breweries. And if pinball is cool, it could be a good way to lure some people in. I've seen a few of the breweries here that have the pinball machines and leagues get together there. There's an overall league that meets in various places around Atlanta. There's a ladies only pinball league that does competitions and stuff. So there's my prediction that I want to see. I'm hopeful. Let's see how that plays out over the next year. And, some places have 1 or 2 machines, 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. But as someone who likes both pinball and beer, I'm on board. I'm hopeful that we may see more of this. Could
I would
be
definitely
fun.
like to see that. I would definitely like to see that. That would
Yeah.
be a nice attraction, something
Yeah.
to do while you're enjoying your beer. Yes.
And Brian, since you asked, Schoolhouse Brewing in Marietta does have the Monster Bash remake machine, which is
Ooh.
a very
Oh,
good one. So
okay.
we should take a trip sometime soon and check
All
it out.
right. I'll have to
But
check that out.
well, y'all, that is the year in beer. That is, God willing, we'll see you in 2024. We hope 2023 has been pretty good to you, or at least not horrible to you. We've got, there was a comment right as we got on Instagram that our friend at Firemaker Firewater Brewing said a lot of good friends lost breweries this year. You know what? We want to send out our heartfelt thoughts and thanks to those that did lose their breweries this year. We had a lot of personal friends here in Georgia. Scott Hadeen, who's been on the show several times with Burnt Hickory Brewery, he had to close down. Jason Pellet, Jason Santamaria was Second Self Brewing.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, I don't want to take up too much time on this, but Atlanta Brewing and Red Brick, it sounds like they're just not coming back. I'm very disappointed that they went out kind of half-heartedly with we're coming back, because I think that brewery deserved a proper send-off. And I think if
Agreed.
they had announced we're closing, they could have had one last hurrah. But the way they did it was kind of uneventful with, we plan to come back, and it didn't happen. And I think it was a dishonorable death to a Georgia craft beer pioneer.
Yeah, agreed.
But
Yeah.
that's all we got for you. Have a happy new year. Enjoy some good beers. Pop a Saison instead of champagne. Get you a nice bubbly Saison to ring in the new year. And, have a good time with it. As always, y'all, we love having you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And don't forget to drink. I hit the wrong button. As always, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. We love having you here. Don't forget to drink local. Cheers.
We'll be right back.
Ta-da! We made it.
We did.
I was
We
so
made it.
close to not screwing that up at the end. So close. So close.
How was my audio and video throughout?
You were fine. You didn't have any issues there.
Good.
You didn't have any issues.
Because my browser completely locked up and I was waiting for somebody to comment. And when I realized you could see and hear me, I've been winging it without I could hear you. I can't it's just locked.
You locked it. You're gonna have to buy a new computer, Brian, because that one's giving you issues. Find out what you broke there.
What I need to do is I'm going to have to stop using the one browser I'm using and switch to the other and see if I get better.
See if that gives it
better
to you.
performance. And there's a whole process involved in that. But good. I didn't want to ruin the flow. Things seem to be going, and I'm like, I think I can do this blind, and I think I pulled it off. So I'm happy about that.
It's
I
like
wish I
just
could have
talking
seen
to somebody, huh? Like just talking to somebody. There.
Well, I still have your locked picture as how you looked, many moments ago. So I'm like, I'll just look at that
with me. There you go. It's like he's really here.
It's right. It's a picture. It's like he's really here.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, y'all, thanks so much for hanging with us. We appreciate it. Again, I hope 2023 has not been too horrible to you. Good would be even better, but we're going to wrap this thing up and we will see y'all in 2024. Cheers.